Let's welcome our global business speaker, Mr. Vusi Thembekwayo.
It cannot always be night.
Vusi, cheers. Here we go.
Hello, everybody. Let's try that again. Hello, everybody. So good to be home. So good to be home. So good to be back in SA. Bafo, I just want to confirm, how much longer do we have until you guys shut us down? I checked on the schedule. It said we should be fine for the rest of the day. So first, a few things to Rosario and the team that's invited me here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Let's give Rosario a round of applause. These events are impossible to do with our sponsors, just because the capital outlay to book a room like this and to get all of you here is quite substantial. So to Heart FM and to each and every single sponsor, MTN, the rest of them, can we give them a round of applause as well? Thank you so much. I prepared a couple of thoughts for you guys. I obviously have noted the time, and I think we are quite thin on time. So what I've attempted to do is to redact some of the ideas that I wanted to share, so that we have more time, hopefully, at the back to do some networking. Hands up if you want to do some networking when all of this is done. Yeah, so certainly this is the reason I came, right? So I'm quite excited to meet all of you and to chat to some of you. I know that there are one or two of you in the room who I've been chatting to on the WhatsApp, friends and old colleagues and business partners from back in the day, whom I'm committed to having a cup of coffee with once all of this is done. Speaking of which, so would you arrange a cup? Thank you so much. I have an addiction for coffee, so I was going to make sure that I've got a cup of coffee. I've got a couple of thoughts and ideas that I want to share with you guys, and maybe just a disclaimer up front about how I'd like to do this. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. There are 3 disclaimers. First, I gave up a long time ago trying to please the hearts of man. Just because man has an insatiable appetite to demand more of you. My only quest, my only desire, the reason I was late at the back is because I was having a conversation with my creator, is I use this platform, thank you, it's not necessary actually, but I use this platform to try and bring glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
So up front, I want to be very clear that over the years, I have learned to approach business differently. Didn't start out this way, I must tell you. 6'2", well-spoken with a Queen's English. I was quite the stud, I was. I was dangerous. Yeah, I was dangerous. But I think as all of us, over the years, God has taken me through a series of experiences that have matured me into recognizing this simple truism, that I am not the owner of my business. Mm-hmm. God is. I'm just the CEO who's appointed for this season. Now, the reason that's important, whether you are a believer in this room or not, is because if you are going to be in business only for the purpose of serving yourself, I can guarantee that you will run out of gas. So the fundamental question then, for all of us as founders and entrepreneurs to ask ourselves, beyond the profit motif, where the opportunities are, how do we scale, how do we grow, who do we hire, is why do you exist? What is the fundamental reason for which you have created and started your business? For me, answering that question was important because it sustained me. It sustained me when there were creditors at the door. It sustained me when I was having to retrench staff. And it sustained me when I, by God's grace, was rebuilding the businesses. What is the greater purpose? So the first disclaimer is that I use this platform as a place of service. Second disclaimer, I will definitely make jokes about you, not me. If you don't like them, it's tough to pay to your end. And I have a strict no refunds policy. And the third disclaimer is, I think, an important one for us as South Africans. I don't know when this happened. I'm a 1985 baby, so I'm old enough to be analog and young enough to be digital. I grew up in an era where my father had white wall on the tires. You remember those, right? Yeah. The very first phone my parents had was one of those phones that you had to stick your finger in the knob and turn the dial. Do you remember those? Yeah, back then, the only way to block somebody was to remove the handset. The very first digital device I ever had was the Tamagotchi. Hands up if you remember the Tamagotchi. Yeah? I remember migrating from the township school and moving into a Model C school, sitting next to a white person for the first time in class. I remember the first white girl I dated. Her name was Siobhan. Green eyes, blonde hair. I tested Mandela's protein. I grew up in the time when South Africans recognized that it was okay for us to be different. Now, for whatever reason, you have allowed these Neanderthals called politicians to tell you that being different is wrong. And as a consequence, everybody is so sensitive about what makes them different, you can't even crack a joke these days. So excuse me if I say, forgive me, fuck it. And let me, by the way, just as a quick segue, let me tell you why the politicians have done this. The politicians have done this because they have nothing to offer you but division. That's why they've done it. They've done it because they've got no new thoughts and no new ideas. They can't put together or tether a simple document to think about how do we structure the global structure of our finances in this country. And these are the people you and I have elected every single day to govern our collective futures. So the reason they sow division is because they have nothing else to offer. Issues-based politics only exist in a society where the values don't exist. I would love to see a politician who talks values-based politics. Because let me tell you, if we were to talk values, we actually have more in common than we do apart. Every person in this room, regardless of what race you are, what age you are, what background you come from, where you were educated, if you were educated, all of you here want to live in a country that's safe, where you can jog at 11 o'clock at night and not look over your shoulders, where you can send your kids to a public school and get them a global quality education, where if you were harmed, God forbid, on your way home, and we send you to a public healthcare institution, you would get global quality access to healthcare. Every person in this room. So I say that only to make the following point, frankly. It's not a part of what I prepared for you guys, but it's an important conversation, particularly for us as entrepreneurs to have, because more and more I'm seeing entrepreneurs fall into the gap of thinking you belong to a political party. You don't. You. Every day in your business, you must canvass for customers to vote for you. And you measure whether customers vote for you by whether or not you're growing your revenues. Every day. Because you recognize that the customer isn't loyal to you. They're loyal to their own needs. And yet here we are, 30 years into our democracy, and we still think we are loyal to people. For what? They're not entitled to your ideas, to your votes, and they're certainly not entitled to your futures. I'm almost sure one or two of them is in this room. Tag me when you come after me, bitch. I'm sorry. I just... Yeah, so, you know, I don't live in South Africa anymore as my primary residence, but we're busy rebuilding, reinvesting here. reopened our office in 90 Rivonia, my assistant was saying to me, now we need to look at something here in Cape Town, etc., etc. But I make this point only to say the following, that I remember at times South Africans believed in South Africa. I remember that, and I'm not an old man. I remember Mark Williams scoring 2 goals against Tunisia on the finals of the African nations. I remember Joel Stransky with the winning boot when we beat New Zealand. I remember that. I remember when we used to believe in who we are. And yet here we are taking the piss about who we are. If you are anywhere in the world and anyone is talking negatively about South Africa, it's a South African. For whatever reason, we seem to have forgotten this simple truism, that greatness is a choice. It's a choice. The greatest companies in the world weren't birthed so. There is nowhere in the Bible, as I've read it, where it says on the 8th day God invented Amazon. The greatest companies in the world were created by people who believed that greatness was possible. Even the nations we all travel to on our holidays exist because those people believe that they're great. The Americans will tell you they're the greatest nation in the world. The data tells us this isn't so, but they believe it. I was on a panel day before yesterday, a business panel. It was myself and Mrs. Vusi, who was the head of Business Leadership South Africa, and one of the non-executive directors of Standard Bank. And the conversation came from somebody in the audience. The question was, how do we get South Africans to support South African businesses? An issue I imagine a lot of us here are dealing with. And my answer was, there can never be a proudly South African customer until there is a proudly South African citizen. Because the two can't be divorced of each other. If you are, I live in the Middle East. There is no way you can convince an Emirati that the United Arab Emirates is not the greatest country in the world. And they have nothing to prove it. It's a small name. The area where I live is 10 million people. Thank you, sir, you can leave it there. The native Emiratis are only 800,000. The other 9.2 million people are people like me, immigrants who have flown in to live there so that we can make a living. And what did they have? Nothing, just a desert, really. And with a desert, they've built one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world. It's so cosmopolitan that your politicians are taking, never mind. So greatness then is a choice. Greatness is a choice. I don't want to spend much time on this. My mother says to me, my mother watches my videos and then she critiques me. My mom says I'm terrible at introducing myself. She says I just launch in. So, a bit about me. This is mom and dad. They met in the year 1965. They were 10 when they met. 20 years before I was born. For purpose of clarity, the image on screen is not a picture of my mom and dad at 10. It's usually somebody sitting in the middle going, I come from a small town called Benoni, made famous, of course, by Charlize Theron, Charlene, the Queen of Monaco, Stephen Kossoff, the founder of Investec, me, no, I joke. This is me as a young lad winning the World Championship in public speaking. I was 17 then. If you can't see me, look for the teeth on the top left. So I want to get back then to this idea that greatness is a choice. What did they do here? Oh, my team put together a series of interests that I'm involved in. I chair Silicon Cape, by the way, so for any of you here who exist in the technology and innovation ecosystem, you should probably check us out. We are the oldest of the silicons in the continent, and fundamentally the work that we do is we work with the ecosystem of innovators and startup founders and entrepreneurs to help them scale their businesses. The business about which I'm probably most known is my growth fund, where I'm CEO, and the Innovation Village, which is one of the largest accelerators and incubators in East Africa, run by an incredible young man called CK in Uganda. So what I wanted to do was really just to click on this idea that greatness is a choice. In competitive public speaking, you're taught that an audience doesn't believe anything you have to say until you show them a graph. So for your benefit, I've got 3 graphs. This is the first one. I'm a student of economics and economic theory. We learn about this thing of quantifying the value or the size of economic activity of any particular nation. Sovereign is the particular term we use. It's the expression you probably heard before, this GDP. There's an interesting guy called Angus Madison, and he did some work called the Jesus Project. And what they did was they framed the world's economy since the death of Jesus. Of course, it presupposes that you are of the Christian proclivity and believe the event to have taken place in the first place. Set aside whether or not you believe in that, the econometrics as they quantify the world's economy is an important starting point for us today. In the dark blue line, you see the world's economy in full quantum over the past 2,000 years, give or take. You notice between the 1st and the 18th century, a linear rise, and then in the 19th and 20th century, massive exponential rise. In the lighter blue line, you notice global life expectancy. There are some who say that not until 1914 it was more dangerous for a woman to give birth than it was for men to go to war. It's incredible, these wonders of modern medicine we have today. You know, today if you have the common flu, you go to the local Dis-Chem or the Clicks, you buy yourself some ACC 600 now. And you might get yourself a headache tablet, and then you go home and you open up your own cupboards. Well, most of you have your own Dis-Chem or Clicks. It's a true story. A while ago I was ill and I was at my mom's, and she went and opened the cupboard, and she had in there paracetamol that expired in 1996. Every black and colored parent knows what I'm talking about. Because for us, expensive things don't expire. They evolve. You have never been to a black household and there's expired Ultramel. Ultramel is too expensive to expire. And we survived. Pour water, shake, and serve again. You know, black person's version of skim milk is whole milk when it's about to get finished. Pour water, shake, and serve again. So the point about this graph is quite simple. The world today is wealthier than it's ever been, and human beings are living longer than they've ever been. There has never been a better time to be this little species that all of us are, called a Homo sapien. On this rock, we have the privilege of occupying called Earth. Never. So, if we're living in the best time in the modern history of Homo sapiens, and we want to build great businesses, then the question is how? And that's what I hope to leave with you here today. To do this, I need you to indulge me. And I'm going to show you, sorry, guys, turn down that volume a little bit. And I'm going to bring you home and give you guys a South African example. When I worked on my first book, The Magna Carta, I had the incredible privilege of interviewing business leaders, South African business leaders. And one of them is I got to interview Y.T. Basson. Amazing, amazing guy. If you've never had the incredible, amazing privilege. In my opinion, and this is a completely biased view, he is the single greatest CEO this country has ever produced. And I'll tell you why I say this. Yeah, I'll tell you why I say this. Y.T. Basson takes over ShopRite in the early 80s. He joins ShopRite in 1977, I think it was. And when he joined, I think at the time they were doing about 16 million rand in turnover. When he left after his term as CEO, they were doing 144 billion in turnover. Incredible. This is the point I made earlier about living in a country where politicians are blinding us to our own greatness. What do you think a man like that could do if you gave him the instruments of government and said, here is a problem with these particular state-owned enterprises, go and fix them? I think somebody who knows how to build a company that it becomes the most dominating retailer in the continent might know a thing or two about how to build complex systems that work. But we don't do that because he's white, male, and Afrikaans.
Crazy.
At some point, we have to recognize that you can advance a group without alienating another.
100%.
So I'm sat in Whitey's office and I'm asking him questions about how he built ShopRite. And I said to him, now when you write a book, you're always looking for theater. It's a bit like writing a movie. I said, give me a single moment that always stands out for you as the one moment that led to the amazing rise of your company. He says, Vusi. You remember South Africa in the year 1991? You remember? I said to him, I was 6. Why? He says, let me tell you. Oh, the country was burning. And in the townships, there was a lot of fighting. And at the time, we somewhere had only 2 stores in the townships. Pick and Pay had 4. I said, yeah, and? He said, both of our stores in the township were looted during the violence. So I called a meeting with old Christu and the Oaks. Christu Visa, the guy who was a billionaire, then wasn't. If you recorded that, delete. He's a billionaire again, by the way. So anyway, he says, I called a meeting with old Christu and the Oaks, and I told them at the farm, I said to them, Mana, we need to grow the business. But the only way she grows is if we serve our people in the townships. I said, wow, what happened? He said, yeah, you know, Christu, he's a lawyer. He someone took 2 hours to tell me no. So I said to him, what did you do? He said, yeah, I'm an accountant. I took 2 minutes. Someone told him, fuck. Now, this is an important point for South Africans who forget what we've come from. So, as a recollection of history in the making during our generation, what I thought I'd do here is to find the video evidence of what South Africa was like at the time. Haven't we look at this?
The graffiti tells it all. The East Rand townships are mean places to live. We're going to Violence is woven into the texture of the lives of the residents of 2 of the townships, Tekosa and adjoining Katlehong, whose slums sprawl southeast of Johannesburg. The Zulus and the immigrant hostels and the predominantly Xhosa people outside once lived at peace with each other, united in their hatred of apartheid.
By the way, there's a lot wrong with the reportage. Peter, who's the reporter for BBC, there are a number of things he gets wrong. Factually, over time, we've learned that there were a number of things that were said about the time that were actually factually incorrect. So I wouldn't be doing justice to our freedom fighters if I didn't correct those factual inconsistencies first. The violence in the townships was manufactured, it was artificial. What happened was the apartheid deep state deployed apartheid spy agents, many of them in blackface, in the middle of the night to perpetuate violence, saying they were from one faction so that they would start violence on the other faction. This was all intended to derail the project of what is South Africa today. Some of you here are old enough to remember the RVB, Eugene Terreblanche storming the very first attempt at Codesa. The point I make, quite simply, is this. If I hear one more South African not understand the importance of this incredible privilege you get to enjoy every day, a country that is democratic, free, that works, where you have the right to say whatever you want to say and that right is protected. That shit did not happen by luck. People died for that. but there has taken so much to bring us to this moment that we would be terrible custodians if we didn't understand the gift of what this free democratic society we live in means. Just the idea that someone sitting in this room is probably even offended by something that I've had to say is the privilege of this moment, and the idea that I don't care. At the time, YT Basson, as most of you here do, has to make deep decisions about how to build his business. Now, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, a man whose contribution to poetry rivals that of William Shakespeare, his contribution to philosophy arguably rivals that of Friedrich Nietzsche. A man whose name will echo into time for eons still. The one, the only, Jay-Z. You see what I did there? You see what I did there? He said, men lie, women lie. Numbers don't. So let's have a look at the numbers. Pick and Pay and ShopRite. Numbers dollarize. Why did I dollarize it? Because if I put rands there, not enough space for my graph. Take the number on the left, multiply it by 18, and add 3 zeros. 3 zeros multiplied by 18, that's the rand number. The blue is Pick and Pay. Very quickly, what do you see? In the year of our Lord, 2003, Pick and Pay is a 30 billion rand a year business. Fast forward 10 years, 10 financial years, 11 calendar years, Pick and Pay grows to 64 billion. In other words, in 10 years, Pick and Pay doubled. ShopRite, 29 billion in 2003. And fast forward to 2014, ShopRite goes to 144 billion rand. Let me simplify what 144 billion is. 144 billion is as near as makes no, 144 billion. Remember when you were in school, they gave you those little exercise books, the Croxley books? Who's old enough to remember this? Yeah? Remember you had to cover the Croxley book, remember this? Yeah, and if you guys at your house didn't have money, you actually used newspapers to cover it. But if you had a bit of money, you went to the CNA and you bought those beautiful covers. You remember those, right? Then you put the plastic on it, yes? But before you put the plastic on it, there was a label that went to the top right. You wrote your name, the subject, and the year of your school. You remember this? Yeah. Am I talking to myself or are we together, comrades? Good, good. Now, before you would have wrapped the book, if you remember, if you flipped it, what was at the back?
Times table.
Man, yeah. Times tables. Do you remember what the last times table was? 12 times. Do you remember what the last number was?
154.
12 times 12. And what was 12 times 12 again? 144. So, if ShopRite made 144 2014, and I've just told you that they did do, in a year that only has 12 months in it, that means they were making 12 billion a month. An average month has 4 weeks in it. 4 goes into 12 3 times. That means they were making 3 billion a week. You work on average 5 days a week. So 5 goes into 36 times. They were making 600 million rand a day. You work on average 10 hours a day. Bend the laws of physics any way you want. You'll find that every hour has 60 minutes in it, which means ShopRite was making $1 million a minute. Why is this important? Because if you just see the number, you forget the sacrifices that had to be made to get to that number. Does that make sense? One of the greatest difficulties I think we have as entrepreneurs living in the modern day is we are on Instagram and we don't recognize that the gram is what's instant, not what the gram is of. I take a picture of this moment and I post it. The picture is instant. It took Rosario a year to create the moment. Does that make sense? So, if you're going to be great, what do you need to do? First, make a note of this. Understand the context in which you're operating. I shared with you earlier that we're busy reinvesting, and that's exactly what it is that I'm doing. Every single point I'm at, every single meeting, every single conversation, every single conference. Tomorrow morning, I leave here and I fly out to Zambia to go and have a look at our operations, meet with our partners and speak at a conference there. And then from there, I go back to the Middle East, etc., etc. And every single where I am, I'm reinvesting and rebuilding. Why? Because I understand that in a market when everyone is running, those who invest first claw market share better. And by the time everybody else comes in, you now own the market share. So first, understand the context. In South Africa today, in this environment, with things the way they are, for those of us that have the dry powder, the liquidity to be able to invest, because not all of us do, my advice to you would be invest. That would be my advice. And I recognize that in this room we all come from different backgrounds, we run different companies at different stages, in completely different sectors, and what invest means different things from somebody in the services business to somebody in a deeply industrial business. I completely recognize this. Still, I would say, if you have the capacity to, invest. Invest. So first, understand your context. And to truly understand your context, allow me to introduce you to my next wife. Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Serena Williams Thembekwayo. Somebody says, isn't she married? Minor thing, we'll overlook it, doesn't matter. Minor, who cares anyway? Who cares? You may or may not be aware of this, but Serena Williams is literally perfect. If you went to Googled the word perfect, clicked on images, this is what you would see. Serena Williams is so perfect that when she plays tennis, she doesn't sweat, she sweats Valpray still water. Ladies, Serena Williams is so perfect, she has no blemish, no stretch marks, nothing. She is pure, and I don't know ask me how I know, but I know. She's just pure, silky goodness. Serena Williams doesn't even put on lotion. She just wakes up lubricated. She is absolutely amazing. She's made every single decision this woman has ever made for her life has been the right decision, except she married a white guy. Bloody bastard. You know, white people, you have no peace, eh? First you take the land, then you take Serena. I love Serena Williams, but let me make this as a point. Serena Williams has been playing a game that hasn't changed since she was a wee baby still. The mistake we make, a lot of us in business, is we don't recognize that the game we play is changing and has changed. So for those of us here who run a business, and thank you, sir, for your kind presentation, I was listening to hear how many of you have systems in your business. Simple things like a CRM system and a financing system. And even if these systems aren't tethered together, at least have them in place. Can't still be keeping customer data on email and Excel. We can't still be sending out invoices on Word. It's 2023, ladies and gentlemen. In today's environment, you have absolutely no excuse. That device in your pocket has more capability than you give it credit for, so use it for the things it's capable of. The game has shifted and changed. Facts. You know this is true because even the country you live in has shifted and changed. The economic student in me went and looked. In the year 1962, the top 3 exports coming from our country were predominantly agrarian. By the year 2015, they were predominantly industrial. In the next 2 to 3 years, they'll be predominantly services. So what does that mean? It means that your company, if you're in the services business, servicing larger companies, will probably be servicing one of the largest services businesses. Telcos, healthcare, banks. The economy we're in is shifting and changing. So is your business shifting and changing. As a test in the room, I'm going to give $1 to everybody in this room, and I've got that much money because I've got a couch. See what I did there? My couch is there. And in my couch I've got dollars. And I'm going to give $1 to every person in this room, and I'm going to ask each of you a single question. I gave you one graph, here is my second. If you could buy a share of either one of these 2 companies, which would it be? At a 40,000 view, they're kind of the same business, Alibaba and Amazon. And I'm asking of you the question, buy one, which would you buy? Hands up if your hand is Alibaba. Hands up if you're an Amazon. Hands up if your hand is not going to go up no matter what I say. Thank you. Now, there is no wrong or right answer to this question, except most people who vote Alibaba typically do so because their thesis is that of a lower revenue line, they're delivering higher returns. Am I right? Right. And this is the mistake we as entrepreneurs can never make. Sometimes you've got to see through the data that's presented. This is a single snapshot view of both of these companies at a 2014 timeline. So what I did do is I looked at just Amazon's numbers since the year she was founded in 1998. And I looked in particular at revenue versus net income. And what you notice is even though revenue is growing at an exponential rate, net income is not. Any of you here who did Accounting 101, remember that thing called a P&L? Hopefully you're reporting P's, not L's.
Yes.
And the main idea behind the P&L is that you wanted to grow your top line. You wanted a really efficient operating model so that you could be efficient with your cost structure. And you wanted to declare as much profit as possible. This is the idea. So why then would you have a company with growing exponential rates of revenues, but the net income is not? One of two things is happening here. Either the CEO needs to be fired, and dare I say, you don't become one of the world's wealthiest men without knowing how to run a business. So it clearly isn't that. Or the CEO knows something we should. What does the CEO know? He knows that in the modern day, rather than worry about revenue and margin per customer per day, we also need to worry about customer lifetime value. Now, I say this because in preparation for this session, I got a number of questions and requests from some of you that said, business is tough, I'm having to make decisions about which customers do I keep and whether or not I continue to service those customers. In the interim, when you're writing loss-making business, that's tough. But sometimes you've got to see things through the length of time. Because the value of that customer is not just this trade, it's each and every single trade in the life of that customer. In the life of that customer. Cognizant of time, I wanted to, again, bring you guys some evidence to support this. So the good people at Porsche, who all of you here know well, understand this concept of a customer lifetime value fairly well. So much so that their CRM system is built to recognize customers who are both industrial as well as non-industrial, non-commercial customers, and treat them and give them the same level of experience and service. Sounds highfalutin, so here's some evidence for you. Have a quick look at this.
Herzlich willkommen im Porsche-Zentrum. Was kann ich für Sie tun?
Ich möchte mein Fahrzeug zur Wartung anmelden. Außerdem bleibt der Anlasser manchmal hängen.
Um welches Fahrzeug handelt es sich?
Um einen Porsche 111, P111.
Meinen Sie 911? Ist es ein Cabrio oder ein Coupé?
111 Diesel, Cabrio.
Hands up if that didn't go the way you expected, right? Yeah, I know. So, and as entrepreneurs, kind of what is the mistake we make when we do this? Well, it's this. Frankly, a lot of us just don't understand how to build businesses that talk to each other. We don't see the elephant, what we call the elephant, right? It's a beautiful fable told by the people of the Punjab province, predominantly Hindi province in India. They talk about The elephant and the 6 blind men. And the idea was that if you took an elephant and placed around it 6 blind men, asked them each what they were holding, because they're blind, they would give you an answer that is contextually true but holistically false. Hands up here if you've got somebody in finance who doesn't understand what's happening on the sales side. Yeah? You have somebody back office who doesn't know the pressures of front office. Yeah? Or if you one of those businesses or one of those teams where as you're coming in from a heavy day of meeting customers and you're walking into your office at 5:30 in the afternoon, all of your staff is leaving. And in your mind you're thinking, but the day is just starting. Often it's because as entrepreneurs we fail to communicate the elephant, to help all of our teams see the full picture. To help the people in finance recognize what's happening in sales, and the people in sales recognize what's happening in operations, the people in operations recognize what's happening with HR. And until we get to do that, it becomes very difficult for us to grow and scale, because typically here's what happens. You scale on the one end and it just stresses the rest of your business. Massive influx of new business, and all of a sudden your labor costs are going up because you're having to pay people to work more outside the ordinary working hours. So what's happening now is you're paying them at 1.5 times the labor rate because they're having to work extra hours. And all of that could have been prevented if we just understood how to make the systems talk to each other. Better organization. Now, in my experience, and by the way, this is a lesson I've had to learn, it's almost impossible for one entrepreneur to be everything. And if you think you are, you're probably a bit deluded. I can almost guarantee that if you are going to be great outside, great networking, meeting people, exchanging business cards, I can almost guarantee you suck at admin. And not only do you suck at admin, you hate admin. You don't even know why it exists. Actually. Let me tell you, I hated admin until somebody said to me, somebody said to me, I don't know if it was Sabrina that said it, but somebody said to me, from when you're born, your life is admin. What's the first thing they give you at the hospital? A birth certificate. You are administrated from the point of birth. And there are some people who love admin. I know, complete psychopaths. They should. I swear, if you love admin, there's a gene of you that is going to be killing people. I'm almost sure. But what you want in your team is you want people who are geared that way, right? You want people who are geared that way. Now, most of us hire in likeness. We hire people who are like us. Same energy and the same way we move. It's often about getting people around us who move differently. And then building an organization that centers on these 3 things. Sharing, collaboration, and trust. Sharing, collaboration, and trust. I'll come back to these in a moment. So how do you build an organization of sharing, collaboration, and trust? Well, you've got to architecture the culture of your business, right? And the way to do that is to recognize that sometimes there actually is no difference between fact and fiction. I'll prove it to you. By show of hands in the room, anyone here was ever told by their parents to eat their carrots because it's good for your eyes? Yeah, I don't know how to tell you this, but your parents lied. They should be in parliament. True story. There is no scientific evidence linking the consumption of carotene to the quality of your eyesight. Just think about what I just said. All of you here who had your hands up probably come from different parts of the city, different parts of the province, raised differently, and yet all of you believe the same lie. Why is this? Because your mother said so. Yeah, but who said it to her? And who said it to her? And who said it to her? So the question I'm asking is the following. What are the deeply accepted lies you have told yourself that your team is telling itself? Ooh, 100 million, we could never get that. That's way too much for us. Ooh, that contract, we could never, that's way too much for us. The minute you set that limit, it becomes real. You will never achieve it just because you believe it. Now, if you're wondering where this comes from, in World War II, the British were experimenting with a radar technology. They gave it to a particular pilot. His job was to fly only at night and shoot down as many Axis force planes as he could, Nazi planes. And he would come back having flown at night, having shot down more planes than the guys flying during the day. What does this have to do with the carrots? Well, he wasn't allowed to tell anybody else in the infantry that he had this piece of technology. So, he would, on his way walking to his plane, his fighter jet, he would have a carrot in his hand because he loved carrots. The literature tells us, eating a carrot a day, he's always walking up to the plane. So people are watching this guy walk up to the plane as the sun is setting, eating his carrot, come back and he shot down more planes and the carrot is gone. And like myth, it started that he must have Superman eyes because he eats carrots. And today, 80 years later, some of you here until I said it still believed it. So the question I ask of you is the following. What are the lies that you believe about yourselves and your businesses? What are those lies? Because there fundamentally is very little difference between fact and fiction. And then one final thing as I close. As entrepreneurs, we need to recognize that value, as we understand it in the world today, is shifting and is changing. We've done some work on understanding how it is that value is shifting and changing. It's 5 fundamental ways. By the way, I'm noticing a lot of us here taking pictures. Would it help you, rather, if I got my team to send a copy of the presentation to the organizing committee? I'll get my team to send a copy. It'll come in PDF format, so you won't be able to watch the videos. It'll be PDF'd. And I'm happy for you to share it. The only thing I ask is if you do, please don't splice it and share it, because I reference other people's work. And if you cut up somebody else's work, in fact, you're making me infringe on their IP. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Very good. 5 fundamental ways that value is changing in the world today. And I want you to ask yourself how you're leveraging these value shifts. First, value is shifting and changing around identity. I noticed a raucous round of applause when the video was played about Mathosa, and the work that he's been able to do with his business and how he's leveraged Google, right? Because today, being an African is not something to be shy about. In fact, the world will pay you to be who you are.
Yes.
They recognize premium in who we are. Right? I think it started first with this incredible movement of Wakanda Forever. It forced the rest of the world to no longer see us as this continent where 3-year-old babies have kwashiorkor and have flies sitting on their noses whilst they hunger for food. But all of a sudden, as a place where there is innovation and life and people and ideation. And that framing is something we can all leverage. I can guarantee all of you here, and I will only share this in the secret sophistry of this hall. My entire business is built on this. It's built on the fact that when I get on stage in the rest of the world, I'm the one they don't see coming. I'm from South Africa. So I'll get on a stage. I'm 38 this year. By God's grace, I've been a professional speaker since 19. 19 years I've had the privilege of this stage. What I've forgotten, most people haven't learned yet. And I'll get on a stage in North America somewhere with some Johnny-come-lately who's on the cover of a magazine and hasn't done 5 years in the game. And because of where I come from, they won't look me up. And every time, I bury them.
Yes.
Use your identity. Use it. If any of you here are in the outsourced services business, when I look at the rand sitting at 20 to the dollar, I see an opportunity. I'll tell you why I see an opportunity, because I see an opportunity for companies in the Northern Hemisphere to outsource their work to you at a fraction of the cost, because they get the same unit of productivity at a much lower cost of labor. Leverage your identity. The second way value is changing is wealth, especially for us as entrepreneurs. Wealth. Quick disclaimer, perhaps a confession. I didn't have a will until about 2 years ago. Could you imagine that? I never had a will. I didn't have a will because, and if I'm speaking out of turn, please excuse me, where I'm from and the way I was raised, you don't do things that anticipate your death. It's a bad omen. You leave it alone. In fact, 150 rand funeral cover. So I didn't have a will. And it wasn't until I had several events happen in my life that it triggered me drawing a wealth picture, looking at what honestly only by grace I've been able to accumulate here in foreign territories, and going, I have no plan for this. And because I have no plan for it, this is important, I can't pass it on. This is around the time when I recognized that I didn't own the business. I was just the custodian. And when you think of yourself as a custodian, your approach changes. What is the decision you would make tomorrow if you knew you were going to be accountable to somebody else for that decision? All of a sudden, that spending doesn't happen, that purchase doesn't happen, but that investment does. So to really reframe and rethink wealth. The second thing I want to say around wealth, I don't know if I'm the only one who's done this, but I believed too much in struggle pornography. Struggle pornography is this idea we are served on social media every day, that struggle is good. That you must work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's rubbish. For me, it changed when my youngest son, Nobi, is 5. He's a rock star, by the way, I must tell you. He said I should tell you. I can't remember the first 3 years of his life. I can't remember them. Because I was so busy being important, I didn't recognize I had the responsibility of being his dad. Wealth can't just be the figures we see when we open our banking app. It also has to be the lives we impact, the connections we make. Admittedly, we're all at different points in the journey in this room, but wherever you are, I hope you have your Damascus moment, where you recognize that whatever problem you're dealing with today, I assure you tomorrow morning it'll still be there. Just put the phone down, put the laptop down, and maybe, go on all fours and crawl with your kids a little bit. Maybe pick up your phone and phone mom, or phone dad. Maybe drive past that old friend you haven't seen in 6 months because you've been busy. Maybe go for that outing this weekend with a friend, have a glass of wine. Money we can make, time we can't. Wealth. Third, legacy. Beyond you, what are you building and why? I think this happens after the first 999 days of most businesses. We spend that first 3 years clawing for air, just trying to survive, literally trying to keep head above water. It's a terrible joke, I shouldn't say it, but you saw this Titanic sub-missile story. By the way, let me just say, as this whole thing was happening, if I'm lying, I'm flying. Like people tell them, were we not like, but white people? Yeah? We were just like, the first thing I thought when I saw that was, why would you go underwater in a geyser? Anyway. But I saw this meme. I said, you guys know the song by John Legend? My head's underwater, but I'm breathing fine. So I saw the meme and yeah, anyway. So the point is, legacy. What are you building? Now here's an exercise for all of you here when you leave. Okay. Tomorrow morning, before you start work, right, I have this fight with my assistant all the time. Because as I get into the office, she's already there with a to-do list. And I'm like, give me 20 minutes of coffee. Let me soak in the day. Let me, just 20 minutes. But tomorrow morning, before you get back into what you do, just indulge me. Write a letter to you to read a year from now. And in that letter, write the things you will have done and the things you would have been proud of having achieved. Take the letter, put it in an envelope, and file it. And read it again in a year. It's incredible what happens when you have that level of clarity, when you arc your mind forward so that you have a directionality about where you want to go. By the way, if you're interested, it's an exercise I do every year. When most people do resolutions, I write myself a letter. Dear Vusi, I am so proud of you for. I wish you would improve in. And it's just a reflection. And the following year, before I write the next one, I open it and I read it. Legacy. Fourth, I'm not sure where this one is going, but we live in a world today that's beginning to question the archetype of binary ideas. I must tell you, by the way, that I'm deeply embedded in studying this, spending more time than I should do, trying to understand where the world is, and this very idea that gender can be different from sex, and there is gender ideology. It's a fascinating field of study. I'm teaching myself to suspend my judgment because I have a particular faith and a particular set of values that I almost want to superimpose as I'm studying this. I mentioned this to say the following. The other day, about a day or two ago, we're interviewing in the company for some salespeople, and we're interviewing a salesperson from the Philippines. And they had declared that they are in transition. So the question starts, can a kingdom business hire a person like this? It's an interesting question. My answer, as the captain of the ship, was that my faith doesn't give me the right to judge. It only gives me the right to guide. I will create the space, I will hire, I will bring you in for your skills and competence. We have a set of values as an organization that we hold dear. Insofar as you're able to operate within the framework of these values, you're welcome. If you want to change those values, you're not. But mine isn't to judge, it's just to guide. And even then, only if you ask of me. Because the way I understand my faith is that it is not for me to tell, but for me to live. I just need to live in a Christian way and you'll see it. And if you're inspired, then you will do it. Now, I mention this only to say the following. I guarantee in the next 5 years, all of you here are going to deal with this issue. It's coming. Your HR policies, they're written in he and she. It's coming. It's coming. And however you decide to deal with it, I wish you the grace and the wisdom of recognizing what that moment presents. And then the final way that value is changing is this idea of free, arguably the single greatest asset we entrepreneurs have. Free. The number of clients we have across our businesses that we first won by offering to do something for free. It was a free meeting, a free engagement, a free assessment, a free report, and it almost always starts a relationship. I prepared an awful lot more than this, but I'm frightfully aware that we have run late on time. I don't know how I fared here. I hope that I've met your expectations.
Come on.
if I have your permission, I do want to tell you one final story. Is that okay? Yes. One last one for the road. So, I shared with you when we started that I won the World Championship, and after I won it, I had the opportunity to meet the founding father of our democracy, Nelson Mandela. I've had the privilege of meeting him twice. I've actually met every single state president in South Africa, but for Kallard. We don't count him, he was a weekend. Well, I can say that joke, I'm black, don't say that joke. Don't say that. Anyway, so I remember I come home and my mom had received a letter from the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I'd been invited to meet him. The meeting was happening 2 weeks after I'd come home from competition in England. And so 2 weeks later, we're now in the heat of school holidays, and I'm supposed to go meet Udada. And mom sends me off to meet him, and she forces me to wear school uniform in school holidays. I've never been cool since that moment. I lost all my cool creds. Anyway, so I'm off to meet Umadiba. And, for those of you here who grew up in townships, you know the story. You have to walk to the main road where the taxi is. Yes? Yeah. So you walk to the main road where the taxi is, and the taxi takes you to a central point, typically a station. And then at that central point, you catch another taxi, and then at that, you catch another taxi. And you've got to be really good with managing your time, because taxis move when they're full. 4 mastarsa. So you can't just leave. You've got to really schedule it and plan it, right? I must tell you that the nerd in me, I once did a Gaussian model, and I actually did the mathematical extrapolation of how long it takes taxis to get to their destinations. And what I realized was that they're really efficient early and really efficient late, because they get full, and then they get massively inefficient in the middle of the day. It's like an upside down Gaussian curve. Anyway, so the day arrives, I go to meet Nelson Mandela, I get on a taxi, second taxi, third taxi. And when my mom sent me to the meeting, she gave me 3 instructions. She said, look smart, sound intelligent, don't embarrass me. And the only way you can do this is if you say nothing. Just ask questions. So I'm decided that when I get there, I'm not going to say anything, I'm just going to ask him questions. And I remember I'm in the taxi and I'm sat in the taxi and I've got my little notebook and I'm writing all these questions I want to ask him. I eventually get to about, 2 sides of a piece of paper, 60 lines in total. I eventually get to his office. The taxi dropped me off and I had to walk about 3 kilometers from where the taxi dropped me off to his office in the scorching heat, I must tell you. I was actually Trevor Noah's complexion. And then, why are you laughing? That's racist, you can't laugh. No, I'm joking. So anyway, so I eventually get to the office and there's a lady there, who was the receptionist, and I go and greet Sanbonama, and she checks for me in the visitor's book. And she finds my name, she asks me to sit. So as I sit down on these reception tables, you know those reception tables, they've got them at ESCOM. As you sit on the chair, your bum kind of sinks into the abyss and your knees rise above your eyes like so. So I'm trying to sit and my bum is sinking, and Zelda, his assistant, is called, and Zelda comes to me. She says, "Hi, are you Mr. Vusi? Which, by the way, is a separate point, but please allow me to make this point. If you are South African and have been here your whole life, you have 0 excuse not to know how to say African names. Yes. And I'll tell you why this is important. And by the way, if you don't know how to say them, don't feel bad. Learn. I'll tell you why this is important. When you're born, the first thing your parents give you is a name. If you go to prison, the first thing they take from you is your name. You can't acknowledge my humanity without knowing and understanding my name.
100%.
It's not complex, it's Vusi. You can take an advanced course for. So anyway, Zelda invites me to that study. We go to the study, and the hinge of the door was broken in. The lock was broken in. So the only way to open it was if she kind of opened both sides of the door and opened it, right? Beautiful golden arch door. And she opens the door. And as she opens it, I'll never forget, vividly remember this. There's a Persian carpet from the entry all the way to the back of the study. The study was narrow but deep. And there's cupboards, wooden cupboards, from the floor all the way to the ceiling, with a glass front in the middle of these cupboards, and what looked like encyclopedias, yeah? A bit like a lawyer's chamber. In the middle of this, there's a quaint little oriental-looking table with 3 chairs on it, around it rather. And if you looked across, beautiful pan-French window. I remember this because if you stilted, you could just see the koi pond running. In fact, it is said that in his hardest days, Madiba would end the day seated, listening to the running water of that koi pond. So Zelda invites me. She says, "Mr. Please take a seat." And she says, "Can I get you something to drink?" Now, Mom said, when you get there and they ask if you want something to drink, tell them you want coffee, not tea. Rather, no, she said, tell them you want tea, not coffee. I asked Mom why. She said, because tea is high tea, coffee is common. So Zelda says, can I get you something to drink? And following Mom's instruction, I said, yes, ma'am, can I have some tea? Then she said, and this has happened, I'm sure, to a lot of us, she asked me those words. When we first hear them, we just blank out. She said, would you like jasmine or Earl Grey? I said, who's Jasmine? I know Joko, I know Tinko. But not Jasmine. It's amazing how far we've come, guys, eh? You know, the other day I was at the Woolworths with my son, and we were buying Woolworths shortbread biscuits. It's bloody, get some more, man. They're shortbreads of food. They changed the name and they charge us 5 times the price. Get some more.
Yes, sir.
Frito, man. Anyway, so there we are, and she brings me the tea, and I'm very nervous. So, well, you know, she brings me the tea, and I try to drink the tea. So I pick it up, and my hand shakes, spills a bit on the saucer. And I put the cup down. No problem, there's a saucer there. Problem is, the next time I pick it up, it spills again, right? And starts to splatter, like it splatters on the shirt. So I'm decided that I'm not going to pick up the cup. What I'm rather going to do is I'm going to lean in, right? And sip the cup, right? Like a contractor at ESCOM, trying to lean in. That was a joke. Last card. There was one last card. No more. We're together, actually. Anyway, so I'm sitting trying to drink, and whilst I'm sitting trying to drink, I heard this like. Most people don't know this. When Nelson Mandela, of the 27 years he spent in prison, he spent 19 of them in Robben Island. And they had to do manual labor, physical labor. This is why he ended up developing problems with his eyes, because they used to make them with a pick, break down the rock face. And if you've ever been to Robben Island, you know that it's got a white cliff face. And so the sun would blast into and it would blast into their eyes. It's also why he had lung problems, because the dust was what they were inhaling at the time. But he also had an issue with his foot. His Achilles tendon was fairly worn. So whereas most of us here walk with the heel of our foot first, he walked with the ball of his foot. Now, I must hasten to add that what's probably least told to us about Madiba is that the man was a giant. And when I say a giant, I don't mean it in the figurative sense, although he was that too, but he was literally a giant. I'm 6'2", I weigh 108 kilograms. I can hold my own in a scrum. Madiba was 6'6". Yeah, I wear size 11, size 12 shoes. He wore size 13, size 14. He was physically a tank. He was a giant. So when he was walking to me, he had this very heavy walk. I heard it. So I'm sitting trying to sip my Eskom tea. And then I heard, go. Where is he? Mr. He's in the study. Okay. Go. Gets to the study. Opens the door. Doof. 2 steps in. Opens up his arms like so. And he looks me dead in the eyes and he says, my son, come here. So my father had been murdered recent to that. And no one had called me my son since my father's death. So I'm sat and he said my son, and I felt this like vaulting emotion. And my stomach got tied up in a knot. And then my chest got tight. It feels a bit like that now. And then my throat clogged up. And then I felt this like massive rush of heat up my cheeks into my forehead. And I knew what was going to happen. Sugar water was going to come running out my eyes. I'm on the brink of tears. And true story, the only thought I had was, Vusi, do not, as a Zulu man, let a Xhosa man see you cry. That's the only thought I had. I leap up, give him a big hug, invites me to sit down, and remember I told you I just wrote questions. Spent 58 minutes just asking him questions. 58 minutes into the meeting, knock on the door, Zelda peeks her head, and it's time for him to end the meeting. So he looks at me, but he's got a deeply puzzled look. He says to me, you know, they told me you're a world champion public speaker. And I said, yeah, what dad? And then he says, but ma'am, you have not spoken. And then he said to me, have you any final questions? The question I asked him is the one I will ask of you. The answer he gave me is the one I will hope you will give yourself one day. I asked him, I said, Dada, what is your hope for South Africa? And he said, South Africans need a little bit of faith. I asked him, what is faith? He said, faith is the ability to see the invisible, to believe in the impossible, and to trust in the unknown. Now, we're in murky waters as a nation today. But the God I serve does not give upon a people a challenge they are not equal to. And so I hope for each of you, for your beautiful city, and for this incredible country we all have the privilege of calling home, to remember that what it takes of us is a little bit of faith. That's my time, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vusi.